Hello, brilliant learners. Welcome back to Easy English Spark, the cozy house where we supercharge your English listening and speaking skills every single week. Today, we're kicking off a brand new 10-chapter mini-series, a sweeping fairy tale journey that begins with Leo's quiet resolve and ends in a new rain of white roses. Along the way, you'll meet magical guardians, a hidden princess, and life-changing choices, each chapter designed to give you fresh vocabulary, real-life phrases, and plenty of speaking practice. Grab your notebook, settle in, and let's spark. Your English together, chapter by chapter, skill by skill, story by story. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Leo's Quiet Resolve. At the very edge of Fernvale, where the river thins into silver threads and the fir trees crowd like silent witnesses, stood a crooked timber hut. Dawn bled softly across its moss-streaked roof, revealing warped shutters, a stone chimney long gone cold, and a door that sagged on rusted hinges. Inside that humble shelter lived Leo, just Leo, with no family name to cushion him, no lineage to boast of, and certainly no fortune to his name. Each morning, long before the marketplace rooster crowed, I watched Leo rise from his straw-stuffed pallet, shake the sleep from his ash-brown hair, and breathe in the wood smoke memory that still lingered in the hearth. There was never a fire. He had no coin for kindling. Yet he greeted the chill with a private smile, as though frost were merely another friend who had dropped by unannounced. His worldly possessions fit into a threadbare satchel, a wooden bowl patched with pitch, a chipped flint knife, and an old cloak the color of damp earth. Nevertheless, before stepping into the pale light, he always paused to straighten that cloak, tugging it across his shoulders as if it were velvet, and not a garment the wind could almost see through. He would pat the knife at his belt, mostly ritual, rarely necessity, then wrap the bowl in a square of burlap. These small acts, precise and unhurried, were Leo's silent rebellion against despair. Outside, the forest greeted him with the crisp scent of pine bark and the muted hush of wings. Wooden-handled axe in hand, he threaded a familiar path among the ferns, tracing yesterday's boot prints until he reached the clearing. There, felled trunks lay like sleeping giants. He planted his feet, lifted the axe, and set to splitting logs the villagers had left for him in exchange for kindling. Each blow rang out like a modest bell, echoing through the valley and scattering a brood of swallows into the pale sky. You might think such labor would burden a man with bitterness. Yet Leo sang, low at first, half hum, half memory. His melody wound through the trees, gathering courage until it danced above the axe's rhythm. His voice was ordinary, but in the early light it sounded like gratitude itself, and the forest seemed to lean closer to listen. By mid-morning he would bind the cut wood with hemp rope and haul it to Fernvale Square. The cobblestones there were harsh on boot soles, and merchants with bright banners hawked ribbons, spices, and salted fish. Leo's stall was nothing more than an overturned crate beside a fountain stained with lichen. Yet he greeted every passer-by with the same bright nod. A copper here, a copper there, never abundance, yet never failure. He often left the square with just enough coin for a crust of bread, and if he chanced upon a child shivering in the autumn breeze, half the loaf found its way into smaller hands. Spring turned to summer, and summer leaned toward harvest. One market day, clouds bruised the horizon. A steady drizzle drove townsfolk indoors. Leo watched the emptying square, his cloak soaked dark and heavy. The baker, shuttering his stall, offered Leo a pitying glance and the last stale roll. Leo accepted it with a grateful grin, as though it were honeyed cake, then tucked it into his satchel for later. When the church bell tolled noon, something in Leo's posture shifted. He surveyed the hushed village, the shuttered windows, the tired cobbles, the doorways where gossip flickered like weak candle flame, and an unspoken question kindled behind his eyes. Is this enough? At that moment the drizzle ceased, and a stray beam of sun slipped between the clouds, striking the puddles until they dazzled like scattered coins. Leo laughed softly, as if the sky had whispered an invitation no one else could hear. I watched him stride to the fountain's edge, roll back his damp sleeves, and splash his face with the cold water. Then, turning toward the distant hills, he murmured words only the stone cherubs could catch. Silverford lies just beyond the ridge. If opportunity has a door, perhaps I'll find its latch there. Decision made, he hurried home. Not with the weary trudge of defeat, but with the quickened step of expectation. In his hut, he removed the axe from its peg, kissed the worn haft in silent thanks, and set it gently beside the hearth. The blade had earned its rest. He folded his few garments, with a care that made them seem more numerous, stacked them into the satchel, and tied the burlap parcel around the wooden bowl. The stale roll joined the bundle, along with a little birch splinter pencil and a palm-sized scrap of birch bark on which he scrawled a single line. I will return when fortune does. Before latching the door, he surveyed the tiny room one last time. The rough-hewn table, the stool he had carved from a knotted stump, the patch of sunlight warming the floorboards. There was tenderness in his gaze, but not regret. He set the latch, tucked the key beneath the stone step for whoever might need shelter, and squared his shoulders to the waiting road. Beyond the village gate, the world widened. Wildflowers nodded from the ditch as if cheering him onward. The river, shallow but fleet, kept pace for a time, whispering secrets only a wanderer could appreciate. Leo's boots were thin and blisters bloomed quickly, yet he pressed on, coaxing music from his lips whenever fatigue nipped at his resolve. As dusk approached, he crested a low ridge and beheld the valley sloping toward the lights of distant Silverford. Lanterns glimmered there like a constellation fallen onto earth. Leo exhaled, half wonder, half relief, and for an instant the ache in his feet vanished beneath the pulse of possibility. He found a sheltering oak at the roadside and built a meager nest of leaves against its trunk. Breaking the stale roll in two, he ate slowly, savoring each dry crumb as though it foretold feasts to come. The night was gentle, and the moon rose kind and round. Before closing his eyes, Leo whispered into the branches, "Tomorrow will know my name." And so, under a tapestry of stars, the penniless woodcutter fell asleep with hope as his blanket and determination for his pillow. If Fernvale ever wondered where its quietest singer had gone, the wind would surely answer, carrying his song along the silvered road toward destiny. Chapter 2. Meeting Madame Astrid. Morning crept over the hills like a silent tide of gold, washing the sky clean of its last shy stars. I watched Leo stir beneath the great roadside oak, flexing numb fingers and blinking sleep from his eyes. The promise of Silverford's distant lanterns still echoed behind his ribs, a steady drum of purpose. He rose, dusted leaf fragments from his cloak, and set off again. Each footstep a soft percussion on dewy grass. A light wind ushered him along a winding lane flanked by hawthorn hedges. Sparrows flitted overhead, stitching bright thread across the blue. Hours slipped past, marked only by the growl of Leo's empty stomach and the rhythmic tap of his walking stick, a branch he had cut and smoothed the night before. By mid-morning, the lane narrowed to a thread, dove beneath a moss-bearded stone arch, and emerged at the edge of a forgotten meadow. There, all at once, the air felt different, warmer in the shade, cooler in the sun, fragrant with something older than summer, rosemary perhaps, or the ghost of wood smoke. Leo slowed, instinct prickling like nettles against skin. Across the meadow stood a weather-gnarled yew, its trunk split by lightning long ago but stubbornly alive. Beneath that twisted canopy, on a stool of polished root, sat a woman whose age seemed impossible to number. Her hair was a tumble of silver cords, glinting in shafts of sunlight. A scarf the color of midnight seawater draped her shoulders, while layered skirts whispered around her ankles in hues of indigo and frost. She turned a page of an enormous leather-bound ledger, the parchment crackling like dry leaves. And though birds sang everywhere else, in the circle of her presence the world held its breath. Leo swallowed his uncertainty and stepped forward till boot soles kissed the meadow's edge. "Good day, madam," he ventured, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Might I share your shade a moment? The sun begins to scald." The woman's gaze lifted. Eyes the pale green of fresh apples regarded him with clinical calm, then softened. At the same instant, every swallow in the hedgerow fell silent. "Good day, traveler," she replied, her tone a bell struck in distant hills. "Shade is a kindness. The tree grants freely. Sit, if your heart means no harm." Leo inclined his head, crossed the meadow, and settled on a fallen log opposite her. Up close he noticed sigils pressed into the ledger's brass corners, spirals, crescent moons, and a shape suspiciously like a fox's head. The woman closed the book, binding it with a suede strap, and resumed studying him as a botanist might inspect an unfamiliar shoot. "Your boots are blistered and your satchel light," she said after a moment. "Yet hope clings to you like a stubborn vine. Tell me, what carries a pauper beyond the comfort of what little he knows?" "Need," Leo answered, honest as a pulse, "and faith that the road can change a man's fortune. I seek honest work, nothing more." A smile tugged one corner of her mouth. Need and faith, the twin torches of every pilgrim. But roads seldom gift fortune without testing the steadiness of the hand that reaches for it. She leaned closer, fingertips hovering above the cloak draped across his shoulders. "That cloth has seen better seasons. Your warmth leaks through every thread." "Aye," he admitted, "but it still keeps the morning chill from gnawing my bones." "Barely," she murmured, and for an instant her eyes seemed to reflect both pity and appraisal, like a jeweler turning a flawed gem in lamplight. Leo cleared his throat. "Forgive me, madam. I have offered no name. I am Leo of Fernvale. And you?" "Names are keys, Leo. I guard mine carefully," she replied, though not unkindly. "Yet, because courtesy is a scaffold upon which trust may climb, you may call me Madame Astrid." The name rolled over his tongue like foreign wine, sweet, potent, and faintly dangerous. He inclined his head again. "Well met, Madame Astrid." She lifted a hand, palm upward. A lone blue feather drifted down, landing across her fingers as if summoned. "Signs," she said, eyes narrowing. "The air is rippling today." She tucked the feather behind one ear and regarded Leo anew. "Tell me, if the horizon split in two, one path easy, one path treacherous, which would you choose?" "I cannot say until I stand at the fork," he answered, then added with a shrug, "But hardship unweathered teaches little. Perhaps I would take the path that fights me, because on the other side I might stand taller." Astrid chuckled low in her throat, a sound like embers cracking. "A poet's courage," she declared, rocking back on the root stool. "The world hungers for it, though it seldom pays in coin." She reached behind her bench, drew out a folded garment of deep sapphire wool, and unfurled it between them. The cloak shimmered as though stitched with twilight itself. Silver thread traced constellations across the hem. A hood lined in dusk gray velvet nested within its folds. Even in daylight its fabric drank the sun, glowing with a tempered brilliance that made Leo's breath hitch. "I have carried this through deserts of red sand and over seas that never sleep," she said, voice softer now. "It was meant for hands willing to shoulder wonder without surrendering to greed. Perhaps those hands are yours." Leo touched the edge, felt warmth, swift and certain, pulse through his fingertips. "It is magnificent. But why entrust such a treasure to a stranger?" "Because the road you walk is about to abandon its humble gravel and climb slopes few dare attempt." Her eyes held him captive, pale irises swirling like storm-caught moss. "And because nothing is free, even when given. Hear my terms." Leo nodded. "Name them." Astrid's finger stabbed east, toward low hills riddled with bramble and mist. "Beyond that ridge lies the Cavern of Echoes, an ancient place where time itself catches its reflection and shivers. Within its heart stand 3 chambers lit by braziers that never die. In the first waits a guardian with eyes like polished marble. In the second, a keeper with eyes of molten bronze. In the third, a sentinel whose eyes mirror midnight lakes. Each stands atop a chest of forgotten riches. They will not harm you unless greed blinds your caution." She gathered the cloak, folded it over her arm, and continued. "Spread this garment on the ground before each chest. Speak a single word of gratitude, nothing more, and the guardian will step aside. Take from each chest only what your satchel can bear comfortably. Do not linger, do not count your bounty, and above all, when you reach the third chamber, look for a quartz prism no longer than your thumb. It rests on the floor, half hidden beneath dust. Retrieve it and carry it back. To me unblemished, Leo frowned. Why seek gold or jewels when you value merely a prism? A brittle wind stirred the meadow's grass. Astrid's eyes dimmed as if remembering sunsets long past. Because the prism remembers a song the world forgot, she whispered. And because some debts walk colder than coin, bring it, and the cloak's magic is yours forever. Fail, and you will wish the cavern's shadows had swallowed you whole. Leo felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders like fresh snow. If I accept, how will I find the cavern's mouth? Follow the crows, she replied, as though this were the most ordinary instruction in all creation. At dusk, they'll gather on a single dead elm beside the road. Turn north there, and mist will guide your steps. And if I refuse? Leo asked, though curiosity already tugged him forward. She smiled, not kindly, nor cruelly, but with the neutrality of a ledger balancing its sums. Then you refuse. The cloak returns to my pack, the ledger records your caution, and you continue toward Silverford. Boots thin, pockets thinner, song perhaps a note flatter than before. Silence stretched between them while skylarks circled overhead. Finally, Leo straightened his spine. Madame Astrid, he said, voice steady, I will take your cloak, face your guardians, and bring back the prism you desire. Something softened in her posture. Pride, perhaps, or melancholy. She draped the sapphire cloak across his shoulders. Its weight was surprising, like water woven into wool. Yet it settled with perfect balance, erasing the bite of early autumn air. A faint scent of cedar and distant rain rose from its folds. Astrid pressed a folded slip of paper into his hand. Here are 3 words. You will know when to speak them. Use them only once. He tucked the slip safely inside his shirt. And the single word of gratitude? Any word born honest, she said. Truth has many dialects. Leo bowed. Then I take my leave, Madame Astrid. As he turned, the meadow brightened. Sunlight poured through a rent in the clouds, igniting the cloak's silver constellations so they shimmered like living stardust. He stepped onto the lane, and behind him the meadow fell abruptly silent. No rustle, no breath, as if it too were holding expectation. When he finally glanced back, the yew stood alone. Of Madame Astrid there was no sign. Only the ledger remained, closed upon the root stool, its brass clasps glinting. A gust flipped the cover open just enough for him to glimpse a single line inked in midnight blue. Every journey bends around, a choice. He smiled, tightened the cloak about his neck, and strode on beneath a sky that seemed suddenly larger than any he had known. The path ahead was no longer just a track of dirt and gravel. It was a ribbon of possibility, woven now with threads of dust-colored wool and the faint, irresistible pull of a cavern humming with ancient promise. Chapter 3. Trial of the Three Guardians. Twilight bled over the ridge when Leo finally reached the dead elm Madame Astrid had foretold. True to her word, a parliament of crows perched in black silhouette along its twisted branches, their wings rustling like dry parchment. At his approach, the birds lifted en masse, wheeling north as one living arrow. He followed, heart drumming, the sapphire cloak fluttering at his heels. The land changed quickly. Grass gave way to ankle-deep heather. Heather surrendered to slick, lichen-slick stone. Moonlight spilled along a narrow goat path that led between two sheer bluffs, and the world fell strangely hushed. No chirp, no wind, only the distant crash of unseen water reverberating inside the earth. When the path finally yawned into a natural amphitheater, Leo halted. There, in the center of a bowl of granite, gaped the entrance to the Cavern of Echoes. An arrow-shaped fissure tall enough to swallow a cathedral door, exhaling a breath as cold as midwinter. He touched the cloak's constellations for courage, ducked inside, and instantly the outside world vanished. A blackness thick as ink closed around him. Even the glittering thread across his hem seemed to dim. He stretched one palm forward. Rock. Another pace. Rock again, damp and slick. A whisper rose at his back, his own breathing ricocheting off. Invisible walls until it sounded like a chorus of urgent strangers. That was the cavern's first test, disorientation. Breathe, he counseled himself. Silence is only sound turned inside out. As if in answer, a pale phosphorescence bloomed ahead, revealing a tunnel ribbed with quartz veins. Leo advanced, one careful step at a time, until the passage opened into a circular antechamber. Here, 3 archways faced him like pages in an unwritten book, each trimmed with ancient runes he did not recognize. In the center burned a single brazier, its coals violet and smokeless, throwing an otherworldly glow onto the floor. He recalled Astrid's instructions: spread the cloak before each chest, speak a word of gratitude, take only what your satchel can bear. Closing his eyes, he turned thrice in place and let instinct choose his first doorway. The arch on his left, engraved with curling owl feathers. The first chamber, a hush, almost reverent, greeted him as he entered. Fat candles, hundreds, hovered midair in slow orbits, each flame steady as a held breath. At the chamber's heart perched a colossal owl, spectral white, feathers wreathing its body like frozen smoke. Its eyes, polished marble spheres, watched him without blinking, reflecting his small frame in twin moons. Beneath that silent sentinel stood a silverwood chest bound in iron ivy. Leo inhaled, unclasped the cloak, and laid it upon the flagstones so its celestial stitching shimmered up at the bird. He bowed with both hands over his heart and whispered the plainest gratitude he knew. "Thank you." The owl's talons released the lid. It glided soundlessly to the cloak's border and settled there, head canting in cryptic approval. Leo lifted the chest lid. Inside, neat stacks of weather-worn parchment, each sheet stamped with unfamiliar monarch seals, promissory notes, trade bonds, letters of credit older than empires, currency of scholars and kingdom builders. He took only 5 sheets, enough, he judged, to purchase tools, bread, and boots for a year, and slid them into the satchel. With a final nod to the owl, he retreated through melting candlelight to the antechamber, the second chamber. The middle arch resembled intertwined foxtails etched in bronze. Crossing the threshold, Leo felt heat bloom across his cheeks. Braziers shaped like open roses lined a corridor, their petals glowing molten. At the far end lounged a rust-red fox upon a lacquered cedar coffer. Its eyes, liquid bronze, shifted, with restless intelligence, tracking his every move. He unfurled the cloak once more, but this time the fox spoke, not with words, but with an image flaring in Leo's mind, a memory of Fernvale's poorest hearths, brittle with cold. He understood. Generosity, or the trial, would harden into fire. Kneeling, he spread the cloak and voiced a deeper gratitude, for warmth shared, unseen. The fox descended, curling upon the star-stitched wool like an ember settling on twilight. Snow. Leo opened the cedar lid. Plates of beaten gold gleamed inside, thin, flexible, easily traded yet heavy by the handful. He chose 3, no more, balancing their weight against future needs. As he closed the coffer, the fox flicked its tail. The corridor's heat dropped to a tolerable warmth. He bowed again and withdrew. The third chamber, only the rightmost arch, remained, carved with rippling water that caught the torch glow and mimicked moonlit waves. A breath of cool air greeted him. He entered a vast, domed chamber where the floor mirrored the ceiling, a perfect black lake of polished obsidian. Suspended above the lake hovered a lynx taller than any living beast, fur glinting midnight silver. Its eyes were still pools, so dark they seemed to absorb the room's faint light. At the lynx's feet rested an ebony chest inlaid with shards of lapis. Leo was suddenly aware of the cavern's silence, a void deeper than any he had endured. He laid the cloak at the lake-smooth stone and searched his heart for the truest thanks he could muster. It came as little more than a breath, for the chance to hope. The lynx leapt soundlessly onto the cloak. Its paws made no dent, yet the constellations across the fabric flared brilliant, illuminating constellations on the creature's fur, stars answering stars. Leo unlatched the chest. Inside lay jewels, sapphires like captured dawn, rubies steeped in sunset, diamonds that hummed faintly with their own inner radiance. He selected a single sapphire, deep and cloudless, and slipped it into his pocket. Then he saw it, half buried in dust beside the chest, exactly where Astrid had promised. Glinted a quartz prism no longer than his thumb. Unlike the jewels, it bore no fire, no luster, just a muted glow pulsing gently as if breathing. When his fingers closed around it, an icy clarity flooded his senses. The echo of waterfalls, forgotten lullabies, distant bells chiming in crystalline harmony. He tucked the prism safely into a pouch sewn inside the cloak's lining. The exit and the echo, satchel now heavier, but not burdensome. Leo collected the cloak. The guardians did not bar his retreat. Indeed, as he turned, all three appeared beside the exit archway. Owl, fox, lynx, each diminishing into faint silhouettes stitched of starlight until only memory remained. He re-entered the antechamber, but its single violet brazier guttered, then extinguished. The runes on the doorways faded. A soft tremor rippled through the floor. The cavern of echoes wanted its guest gone. Darkness surged. Leo pressed a palm to the wall, steering by intuition more than sight. The tunnel felt unfamiliar, forking, where before it did not, descending where it once rose. Whispers curled at the edge of hearing, fragments of his own voice, spoken minutes earlier, now twisted into doubts. You should have taken more. Astrid will betray you. Hope cannot feed you. He clenched the prism through the cloak, and the whispers dulled. The quartz sang, soft, confident, guiding him like a lodestone. He chose upward paths, colder breaths, faint drafts scented with night. At last, a wedge of moonlight pierced the dark. He lunged, stumbled into the amphitheater, and collapsed upon damp grass, lungs roaring. Overhead, the crows still traced slow circles as if time had scarcely passed. Yet Leo sensed he had crossed a threshold no clock could measure. He rose, adjusted the cloak, and glanced once at the cavern mouth. For the briefest instant, a spectral owl perched on the ledge, bronze eyes blinking farewell. Then it was only shadow on stone. He set his sights eastward. Madame Astrid awaited, ledger open, debt tallied. The prism at his breast felt both light as frost and heavy as promise. And so, beneath a sky spangled with indifferent stars, Leo resumed his journey, richer by coin, burdened by destiny, and shadowed by 3 unseen guardians whose quiet approval glimmered at his back. Chapter 4. The Crystal Orb's Price. Mid-morning light fanned over the granite bowl as Leo tightened the drawstrings of his satchel and began the long descent toward the valley. Behind him, the cavern of echoes slept again, its mouth a thin, black scar against the cliff face. Yet the vault of rock seemed to watch him leave, as though it, too, wished to learn how the next verse of his journey would be sung. The sapphire cloak rested across his shoulders in easy folds. Inside its lining, the quartz prism, small, cool, impossibly heavy with promise, nested like a secret heartbeat. The day grew still. Even the crows, those constant witnesses, coasted in mute spirals a good distance overhead, unwilling to break the hush. Leo's boots squelched through damp heather, and every so often he heard the faintest crystalline hum, a resonance that trembled up his spine. He soon realized it issued from the prism whenever sunlight glanced against the wool. It was not music. Exactly. Rather the memory of music, the ghost of a single note trying to remember itself. By the 6th hour of his trek, the trees thinned, and the forgotten meadow came back into view, edged by whispering hawthorn. The war-scarred yew still commanded the clearing, its lightning-split trunk crooking skyward like a question mark cut from charcoal. Beside that trunk waited Madame Astrid, precisely as if she had never moved. The ledger rested on the polished root stool, the midnight blue scarf coiled at her throat. Yet something in her posture struck Leo as newly brittle, as if her bones carried another person's winter. She looked up the instant his boots touched meadow grass. "You return," she said, betraying neither surprise nor relief, "and whole." "I return," Leo answered, bowing from the waist. "Cavern guardians and the trials lie behind me." "Do they?" She raised one silvered eyebrow. "The true trials often travel with us." Her gaze flicked to the swell of his satchel, then to the cloak's constellations that shimmered in noonday glare. But let us not wander through riddles. Have you brought the prism? Leo slipped a hand beneath the cloak's inner seam and produced the small crystal. Sunlight sheared across its facets in pale rainbows, and the meadow answered with a hush so complete the grass forget it knew wind. Astrid inhaled, not greedily, not even eagerly, but with a tight-lipped necessity, as though air itself were the final cost of her bargain. You have delivered it unmarred, she murmured. Set it here. She tapped a narrow strip of linen, spread across her ledger. 3 faint runes inked at equidistant points, spiral, crescent, stylized foxhead, identical to the brass corner motifs. Leo closed his fingers around the prism once more. First, he said, tell me why this trinket matters. Gold and promissory notes I understand. I can buy bread and shelter with them. But this, he held the quartz up so that stars winked inside, sings, madame. Stones do not sing without cause. Astrid blinked, but her voice remained even. An innocent question, though I hear suspicion lurking beneath its coat. Very well. In another age, the prism lived in a tower of harmonics, where scholars studied the mathematics of light. That tower fell, but the prism remembers its lessons. Return it to a certain socket, one hidden far from curious eyes, and it will unlock. A cord the world mislaid. In that cord lies payment for a debt. What debt? Leo pressed. The cloak's fabric tingled against his wrists. A debt whose ledger does not belong to you, she said, not unkindly, yet not softly either. Give me the prism. From overhead a croak split the tension. A lone crow dove, banking sharply, then vanished into the yew's hollow. Leo felt the meadow tilt. A hush bled into menace. Your cloak's magic is yours forever, Astrid reminded him, quoting her earlier promise. But promises fray when oaths are delayed. An oath untested is no oath at all, he countered. Explain the price. You spoke of danger if I failed. You spoke nothing of danger if I succeeded. At that, something behind her eyes cracked like glass buckling under ice. She rose from the root stool, skirts rustling like stream-worn pebbles. Very well, traveler of fine questions. She stretched an arm westward toward slopes where storms gathered. Beyond that horizon sleeps a king whose heart has calcified into silence. Years ago, to shield a wounded realm from civil ruin, I promised him the song of the prism, promised that its resonance would mend his failing mind. For this I bartered away many sons of my own life, and every dawn that promise remains unfulfilled. Another drop of my time dissolves. Her shoulders sagged, years suddenly visible in the curve of her spine. I have no more seasons to spare, Leo. Compassion pricked the back of his throat. Yet another voice, a miner's voice, digging for ore beneath sentiment, whispered, "Caution. If the prism's music can heal a king," he asked quietly, "what else might it wake? Rot hides behind old walls as easily as promise." Astrid's jaw tightened. "Let us not moralize prophecy. The prism belongs with me. Place it on the linen, accept your cloak's full blessing, and step into your golden future." She extended her open hand. For one heartbeat, Leo imagined giving it to her. Imagined the ease of a completed bargain, the thrill of gold plates clinking, the warmth of a hearth purchased outright. Yet in that same heartbeat, the cloak pressed cool against his nape and the prism pulsed like a sparrow's racing heart. He remembered the silent guardians, the wine-dark shadows that had parted while he whispered gratitude. None of them had demanded anything in return. Wonder had behaved like grace, not contract. Leo closed his fist. Not yet. Astrid's entire manner iced over. "You would renegotiate?" she asked, incredulous. "I would understand," he replied. "If this relic truly rights what is broken, why not let me accompany you? Two keepers guard a treasure better than one." "Because the agreement is mine alone," she snapped, voice cracking like a whip. "Because the king's spies salt every road between here and his citadel." Another face would draw notice. She stepped closer. Her shadow, oddly elongated, reached him before her feet did. "The prism, Leo." Reflexively, he shuffled back, past the ledger, toward the meadow's rim. Astrid's eyes flashed, no longer apple green but glassy and bloodshot, ringed with hairline fractures of midnight. "Do not force me," she said. "Bargains seldom survive coercion." Leo shook his head. "A bargain weighed in secrecy is weighted lopsided. Tell me the whole truth, or keep your cloak." He slipped the garment from his shoulders, meaning to lay it on the grass between them as a symbol of readiness to forfeit. But the stars across the hem darkened, as though offended by abandonment. In a breathless beat, the weather shifted. The meadow's air thickened. Distant firs groaned under an unseen gale. Astrid's skirts flared, and from somewhere within that layered cloth she produced a river stone, smooth as justice, cold as morning. She hurled it with startling precision. The stone clapped Leo's brow. Sparks burst behind his eyes. He staggered, blood pooling warm above his temple. The prism slipped, but he caught it just before it kissed the dirt. Hand, it, over. Each word drilled the hush like a nail. Astrid's voice swelled, echoing too loudly for open air, an unnatural resonance that belonged inside caverns or cathedrals. The ledger on the stool rattled. Its brass clasps burst, pages riffling in a cyclone of ink and vellum. Leo tasted iron, vision seared red. "Madame, you strike me as an enemy, not a debtor." "You make me one," she cried, and advanced. The ground beneath her appeared to ripple, distant thunder curdling. In her eyes he glimpsed desperation. No petty greed, but a creature lashed to stakes of her own swearing. Leo's free hand groped for anything: memory, counsel, courage, and brushed the folded paper she had once pressed upon him. The slip, inscribed with 3 words. He had never looked at them. Instinct said their power resided in ignorance. Now, out of options, he snatched it from his breast pocket, unfolding it so quickly the edges sliced his thumb. 3 characters, simple, stark, crossed his gaze. Vox finet. He spoke them before thought could intercept. Air collapsed inward, with a roar like ocean sucked into a bottle. The meadow's colors inverted, sky bleaching to pewter, grass paling into ash. Astrid's hand, mid-lunge, froze. Her eyes widened with animal panic, as if she, too, had not expected the phrase to wield such force. Sound bled away, no crow, no wind, leaving only the pounding of Leo's heart. He seized the moment, clutching cloak, prism, and satchel, and sprinted toward the hawthorn gap. The world righted itself in jolts. Color returned. The roar unwound into ordinary rustle, and behind him Astrid's command tore through the air. "You cannot outrun a promise." Leo vaulted a mossy stone wall, boots skidding down the far slope. Shrikes screeched overhead, spooked from hiding. He didn't slow until the meadow lay 2 ridges behind, its borders swallowed by fog. Only then did he collapse against a fallen birch, lungs burning. The sapphire cloak lay tangled at his feet, its starlit embroidery flickering like candles in a storm. The prism glimmered faintly in his palm, but the hum had stilled, as though stunned into silence by the words he'd unleashed. "Vox finet," he mouthed, tasting the syllables. Voice finished? Or perhaps the voice that ends. Whatever the translation, its cost loomed. Astrid's face, twisted in betrayal, was now etched into the ledger of his conscience. Evening shadows crawled from rock to rock. Leo wiped the blood from his forehead, tore a strip from his cloak's inner lining, and bound the cut. Somewhere ahead, a ribbon of smoke hinted at farm chimneys, outskirts of Silverford. Food, doctoring, and a quiet room awaited, but peace would not follow easily. Astrid would hunt him if her strength allowed, and a king with a broken mind might soon learn his name. Yet the cloak still warmed his shoulders when he rehung it. The prism still pulsed, faint, determined. Guardians, though unseen, had accepted his word, and a choice once made carves a channel no regret can damn. He stood, steadied his breath, and trudged toward the distant lights. The path, once wide with possibilities, had narrowed to a single obligation: protect the song of the prism until he knew, beyond doubt, whom it should truly serve. Somewhere behind him, the crows at last regained their voices, and their harsh chorus rose above the meadow like a warning toll, part elegy, part omen, wholly unresolved. Chapter 5. Fortune and the Hidden Princess. Silverford did not so much welcome newcomers as measure them, weigh their worth, and then decide whether to applaud or ignore. At first glance, it was a charming riverside capital. Steep-roofed gables, flower boxes dripping with crimson geranium, market awnings bright as carnival bunting. But beneath the cobbles lay 1,000 private ambitions, and the air itself seemed forever busy, comparing silks, counting coins, or sharpening rumors for sport. Into this finely tuned vanity marched Leo, half dazed, half determined, with the owl's bonds, the fox's gold plates, and a single sapphire stitched discreetly inside his cloak. He arrived at dusk, slipping through the southern gate just as the lamplighters touched flame to the iron sconces. Lamplight licked the wet stones amber, and rain haze turned the whole city into a glittering mirage. For a heartbeat, he felt like an imposter trudging through someone else's dream. A sudden ascent. The first night he rented a cot above an apothecary. One squeaky window, one thin blanket, and a drifting perfume of fennel that stung the eyes. At dawn he descended into the market square and cashed the 5 parchment promissories with a merchant broker who eyed the wax seals, paled, and bowed almost to the floor. By noon, Leo possessed a purse plump enough to hire master masons, and by sunset, he'd purchased a narrow 4-story townhouse overlooking the River Quill. His next errands came with dizzying speed. A tailor named Mrs. Wren measured his shoulders, clicked her tongue, and produced an entire wardrobe within a week. Dove-gray frock coat, midnight waistcoat, boots buffed to a mirror, and gloves that smelled faintly of sandalwood. He hired a bookish young valet, Tomlin, all elbows and earnestness, to manage correspondence, keep ledgers, and polish the sapphire cloak's silver clasps until they shone like morning frost. Leo expected to feel like a foreigner in fine clothes. Instead, he discovered that generosity translated fluently across class lines. Each morning he left coins on bakery counters when the baker's wife was distracted, or paid the cobbler double for resoling a poor child's boots. Word traveled. Within a fortnight, Master Leo of Fernvale became a minor celebrity. Mysterious. Origin, impeccable manners. Pockets apparently lined with starlight. Front porch gossip christened him the gentleman of the blue constellations, for he was seldom seen without that shimmering cloak folded just so across one shoulder. He dined with merchants who toasted his arrival, bowed to magistrates who asked after his investments, and danced twice at the orchard ballroom, where chandeliers shed prisms over the polished walnut floor. Yet each triumph left a faint hollow beneath the ribcage, a whisper of unfinished purpose. The prism rested every night under his pillow, humming quieter than a lullaby, as if reminding him that luxury was only an interlude, whispers of an invisible princess. Silverford adored secrets, but some secrets grew so large they were spoken of only in strategically lowered voices. Tomlin first broached it while decanting port one rainy evening. "Sir, have you heard the tale of Princess Elisanda?" Leo leaned back, swirling the glass. "Only that our good King Roland has a daughter. The court keeps her well protected, I'm told." "Protected, one word for it." Tomlin's voice dropped. "She lives in North Glass Spire, the tower beyond the palace ramparts. Windows made of blackened crystal, single bridge, guards posted, day and night. No one sees her, ever. Some say the king fears assassins. Others swear a prophecy foretold she'd wed a pauper and topple the dynasty." Leo felt the prism warm against his chest, as though the crystal approved of prophecies involving paupers. "And which version do you believe?" "That any locked door tempts the key that fits it," Tomlin answered, surprising himself with the flash of poetry. Over the following days, the princess surfaced repeatedly, mentioned in jesting ballads, painted in murals, immortalized on porcelain yet never glimpsed in flesh. A visiting minstrel strummed a tune about Elisanda of the crystal cage, whose laughter could mend broken clocks, and whose tears could fog glass. Children chased each other through alleyways shouting they were wall jumpers, sneaking a look at her smile. But adults fell suddenly sober if pressed for details. A missing queen, a king grown stern, a council that disliked omens, a door that wasn't there. curiosity rooted in Leo like a slow-growing tree. One cloud-scraped morning he donned ordinary traveler's garb, tucked the cloak inside a leather satchel, and walked the long promenade that skirted the palace moat. Northglass spire rose beyond sculpted gardens, its obsidian windows reflecting only sky. He noticed swans on the black water, their wings clipped, creatures of pure grace grounded for aesthetics. A metaphor, too, pointed to ignore. He tried the public gate first, bowing politely to the herald in white and gold livery. The man's answer was soft but flint-edged. Private business only. Audience petitions filed 2 months in advance. The princess, regrettably, is unavailable to visitors. Leo thanked him, withdrew, and circled to the servants' arch where carts delivered linens. There, a porter eyed him suspiciously until Leo pressed 3 silver coins into the man's palm with a murmured compliment about the palace carpentry. The porter softened, traded rumor for coin. High windows, yes. Triple latch doors, yes. But there's talk of a narrow postern in the cliff wall, sealed, not watched, built long ago as an escape tunnel for the royal nursery. No one dares test it. The king's edicts are— The porter shivered, unforgiving. That night Leo traced the palace district on a map until candle wax pooled at his fingertips. The sapphire cloak lay across his chair, constellations glowing faintly as if urging movement. But he did not act, yet. Guardians favored patience. Recklessness only pleased storytellers. An encounter at the Fox and Lantern. Late summer brought nights warm enough for open-air tavern music. Leo frequented the Fox and Lantern, a riverside inn whose balconies overlooked moorings strung with fairy lamps. One such evening, as fiddles scraped lively reels, a cloaked stranger settled opposite him without invitation. Candlelight revealed a woman with soot-dark hair, eyes like overcast jade, and a scar tracing her jawline. Small, deliberate, too precise for accident. Her voice carried the metallic poise of someone used to bargaining with silence. "Master Leo," she began, "you purchase rare books from Vellum Row, commission violin quartets for orphan fetes, and tip gondoliers even when the river is iced. Such fondness for charity could bankrupt a saint." "I manage," he said, sipping ale. "Have we met?" She peeled back one glove, revealing a palm marked by a sigil of crossed arrows. "I speak for the keepers of the crown's peace. We catalog unusual movements within the city, particularly those orbiting Northglass Spire." "I orbit nothing, madam, save the moon when it cares to accompany me." Then allow a cordial caution. The king's patience oxidizes quickly. She leaned in. but privately between one citizen and another. If you learn anything about our missing queen's final relics, gems, charms, coral keys, you would be wise to surrender them. The monarch believes such objects trouble his daughter's dreams. With that cryptic note, she vanished into the fee crowd, leaving only the faintest mint scent and a copper coin embossed with the same arrow sigil. Leo fingered the prism through his waistcoat. Choral key, she'd said, too close to harmonic tower to be coincidence. He pictured Astrid's fury, her ledger whipped into a cyclone, and understood, at last, how widely webs were cast when kings feared prophecies, riches in a cage of etiquette. Weeks passed. Leo's social calendar fattened with invitations, terrace suppers, art unveilings, charity regattas on the Quill. Silverford adored a novelty hero, and the gentlemen of the blue constellations obliged, though each banquet tasted a little hollower than the last. One crisp evening he stood on his townhouse roof while Tomlin catalogued accounts behind him. Lantern light from North Glass winked across the river like the eye of a watchful dragon. "Tomlin," he said suddenly, "suppose a man wished to hire discreet craftsmen, stonemasons unafraid of tunnels, locksmiths sworn to silence, strictly theoretical, of course. Who would he consult?" Tomlin didn't ask why. He simply replied, "In the weaver quarters, south of the dye works, there's a guild calling itself the Night Joiners. Their contracts are signed in invisible ink, payable only upon first dawn after completion." Leo nodded, mind already drafting. Blueprints on starlit air. Find the sealed postern, bribe the joiners, melt the lock, step into legend. Yet a sharper voice, a steward of the prism's deeper purpose, cautioned him. Learn the princess before rescuing the symbol she has become. So, he gathered stories instead. Palace gardeners whispered that Elisanda sang every dawn, her voice weaving through crystal panes until sparrows nested on ledges just to hear it. A retired tutor recalled her mother's affinity for white irises. Now the flower beds near the spire held only wilted stems, as if mourning. A vintner's apprentice who delivered bottles to the outer kitchens claimed the princess once thanked him through a shutter, the single word sweeter than any pressed grape. Nightly, Leo returned to his rooftop, the cloak draped over the parapet like a portable galaxy, and rehearsed questions he would ask her. Do you still dream of rivers? When did you last feel grass beneath bare feet? If prophecy named you, do you accept or refuse its script? The river answered with moonstruck ripples. The prism clicked faintly against his chest, a metronome of destiny. Threads converge. Summer leaned into harvest, and harvest tipped toward autumn's first breath. In that sliver of seasonal hesitation, Silverford held its grandest event, the Mask of Mirrors, a night when every citizen, commoner and magistrate alike, donned costume and anonymity, dancing through lantern-lit lanes until dawn reclaimed their faces. Even Northglass Spire, rumor insisted, hung a single lamp of blue crystal in observance. Leo ordered no mask. He possessed one already. The city's darling philanthropist, a persona woven from silver payouts and polite smiles. But a new costume would be required. The cloak reversed to reveal its charcoal lining, boots dusted to dull their shine, hair unbound. He would mingle among the costumed throng, not as Leo the Fortunate, but as Leo the Question. For amid the laughter and false faces, doors unlatched, and guards grew human. A single footstep might find the sealed postern. A single note, perhaps coaxed from the prism, might echo through crystal corridors until a princess heard freedom call her by name. Standing before his bedroom mirror on the eve of the mask, Leo fastened the cloak's clasp. The constellations winked once, as though approving the risk. In his inner pocket, the quartz prism pulsed, urgency rising with each heartbeat. The owl's silent wisdom, the fox's cunning fire, the lynx's midnight eyes. He felt their invisible presence gather, guardians ready for a new chapter of tests. "Hold your courage," he whispered to his reflection, then to the humming crystal. "And I will hold mine." Below, the city bells tolled 9. Echoes skittered up stone lanes. Fireworks already painted test blossoms against the dark. Somewhere within the palace, a girl of royal blood surely glanced toward that sound, wondering what freedom smelled like. Soon, if prophecy, patience, and a pauper's daring aligned, she might know. And so Leo stepped from lamplight into shadow, cloak billowing like captured twilight, fortune balanced in one hand, an unfinished melody in the other, and the future of a hidden princess lying somewhere between. Chapter 6. First Moonlit Escape. The night of the Mask of Mirrors arrives, whispered in silver. Across Silverford, every doorway blooms with lanterns, fish-shaped globes that bob on braided strings, masks of tin and mica nailed above lintels, streamers that snap like dragon tongues in the breeze. Laughter gutters along alleyways, bright as spilled wine, while the river quill mirrors each torch flare until the water itself seems to breathe fire. I tighten the charcoal side of the constellation. cloak around my shoulders and become for a single evening a man of no particular name. My boots have been dusted dull, the usual shine of prosperity muted, so I might slip through crowds as an echo rather than a proclamation. Beneath the cloak, the quartz prism lies warm in its pouch, beating a patient rhythm against my ribs. Reminder that tonight is not sport, but purpose. Into the carnival. The eastern market square churns with disguises, jesters in feathered collars, dukes dressed as coal sweep boys, a pair of magistrates wobbling on stilts to hide their girth. I drift among them unseen. Where torches flare brightest, I pivot to shadow. Where minstrels strike chords, I let their chorus mask the hush of my tread. Near the fountain of the winged stag, I glimpse the scar-jawed envoy of the crown's peace, her arrow sigil now painted across a porcelain mask. She scans revelers, looking for anyone who stands too still. I duck behind a vendor cart and let a puff of candy glass smoke curl in front of my face until her gaze slides past. At the square's northern lip, the street narrows, turns abrupt, and ends at a cargo gate seldom used. Tonight its iron grid yawns, open for costumed bargemen transporting barrels of festival mead. I merge with them, shrugging beneath a burlap hood, and pass beneath the arch before any guard can test my accent. Beyond the gate, a service road twists beneath the palace cliff. The revel ringing the city is distant here, torches thin, laughter falters. Moonlight, bright and unmarred, spills down the obsidian slope like milk. Halfway along the wall, I find the marker the night joiners etched for me 2 dusks ago. 3 chalk dots in the mortar, placed waist high. I pry a stone loose, push, and a panel of rock swings inward, silent as regret. The forgotten postern. The passage yawns, throat tight and black, smelling of centuries-old dust and the rust of long-dry chains. I strike no flint. Instead, I pinch. The prism between thumb and forefinger. A pale glow wells from its facets, soft enough to hide, sure enough to guide. Onward I tread, counting my breaths so I do not count my fears. 20 paces. 40. The prism's light exposes skeletal remains of toys, an ivory horse missing its rider, a cracked rattle, the relics of a royal nursery that once looked to this tunnel as its rescue route. I whisper a promise to forgotten children and press on. Presently, the passage tilts upward and ends in a wrought iron grate finer than lace. Through its filigree, I spy a chamber paneled in night-black glass. A ad. Single candelabrum burns, its flame captured and doubled by every wall until light seems to hang in layers. Servants come and go with silent steps, their reflections walking ahead of them like ghosts. When the corridor clears, I set the prism in a niche and tap one silver star embroidered inside my cloak. The cloth understands. Threads flex, gears, hidden in him unfurl, and the cloak's edge shapes itself into a deft tool. I lift the latch without so much as a sigh of metal. 2 breaths later, I stand inside North Glass Spire, meeting Elisande. A spiral staircase winds upward, each step a slab of onyx veined like frozen lightning. At its summit, a door of frosted crystal guards the princess's chambers. Legend claims it forgives no intruder. I lay my palm against it. The quartz prism, hidden beneath fabric, pulses once, an almost affectionate nudge, and a faint chord thrums through the glass, not loud enough to wake a mouse, yet perfectly tuned to coax hidden tumblers. The door blooms open. Princess Elisande sits at a writing desk, quill dripping starlit ink onto half-filled pages. Her mask, mandatory for the festival, although none will see her, lies discarded beside an untouched supper tray. Chestnut hair tumbles in waves over a shift the color of sunrise behind clouds. She lifts her gaze, and shock paints her features until wonder shoulders it aside. "Who are you?" she whispers. Her voice sounds like a rain-kissed chime, soft, certain, aching to believe in impossibilities. I bow, but keep my answer plain. My name is Leo. I have come to return to you something the world withheld. The night sky without a pane between. She tenses, poised to scream or flee. Yet what catches her breath is not fear, but longing. Is it real? The city's laughter I hear? Are they truly dancing under lanterns shaped like dragonflies? They are. And you can too if you trust me. I extend a gloved hand. She studies it, notes the cloak lining, eyes widening as pinpoints of silver drift across charcoal folds. Some old lesson in courtesy tilts her head. Then she lays her fingers atop mine. They are cool as petals. When I close my grip gently, they warm. For the guardian's answer. We step into the corridor, but a footfall echoes below, distant yet converging. I guide her back toward the postern. As we descend the spiral, armored boots clatter on lower steps. A patrol, perhaps roused by the prisms, earlier hummed out no time for stealth. At the grate, I lift my cloak's outer seam and whisper to the prism, I owe you a melody. The stone flares, one pure note, and in the tunnel air dilates. A drift of feathers collects itself into the spectral owl guardian. Marble eyes regard the princess only long enough to acknowledge innocence. Then two vast wings unfurl, cushioning. Sound. I motion Elisanda onto the owl's broad back. She gasps but does not falter. I climb behind her, grasping downy plumes that feel like chilled smoke. The owl squeezes through the grate, talons curling without touch, and we sail along the passage faster than any running guard could match. Candles gutter in our wind, and forgotten toys spin in our wake. At the tunnel mouth, the owl bursts into open night. The mask still riots luminous along distant boulevards, yet this strip of riverbank sleeps beneath willow shadows. The owl banks, low, sets down in dew-soft grass and dissolves into moonlight. Elisanda lands lightly, balance perfect despite moon-pale cheeks flushed with exhilaration. She inhales, sharp, disbelieving. "Grass," she says, kneeling to press both palms into the earth. It hums. "The world sings in many registers," I reply. "Stone just carries the quietest harmony. A garden of borrowed stars." We skirt fishermen's cottages, cross a wooden footbridge where reeds murmur like midnight confidants, and reach my townhouse garden, an inner courtyard behind river-facing walls. I've cultivated night blooming, flowers here, moonlace, pearl hyacinth, ghosts in the cloud. Tonight their alabaster petals glow, echoing constellations overhead. Elisanda steps barefoot onto a flagstone path. White blossoms release perfume so delicate it seems woven from snowflakes. She twirls, arms wide, letting moonlight braid through her hair. Laughter escapes her. First a tremor, then a bell of pure delight that startles a nesting thrush. I watch, unashamed of the tears that gather behind my eyes. She pauses by a marble bench. "Tell me, Leo, does everyone outside walls live like this?" "No," I admit. "But anyone can taste moments of it." I kneel, pick a single moonlace bloom, and offer it. Even prisoners of prophecy. Her expression shifts, surprise, then caution, and finally a fierce curiosity. "You believe the stories," she says. "I believe prophecies are doors. Some lock, some open. The trick lies in choosing whether to turn the key." She sits, tucks the bloom behind her ear. For a while silence stretches, comfortable as a borrowed cloak. Then she asks the question she must. "Why me?" I draw the prism from its pouch. Its facets reflect garden torches and broken rainbows. "Because this crystal carries a song that kings fear and seekers covet. Someone swore an oath to trade it for power. I refused. It seems to want to be here, with you, under honest sky." she, though, extends hesitant fingers, not to take but to feel the promise humming through quartz. It vibrates like a caged harp string, she murmurs. Perhaps it recognizes another captive melody. Our eyes meet. Something unspoken clicks into place. No promise, no pretense. Simply the startling recognition of two souls who have walked different labyrinths and arrived at the same gap in the hedge. Before the bell. A distant tower clock begins its half-hour chime. I count. 11:30. The mask ends at dawn. Palace guards will tighten routes before first light. Regret tastes metallic on my tongue. You must go back, I say. She straightens, chin lifted in royal resolve tempered by newborn rebellion. Will you bring me out again? If you wish it. She stands. Then know this, Leo of Fernvale. Tonight is not escape. It is proof. Proof that bars can bend, that breath need not fog glass to keep existing. I will remember. She hesitates, then smiles. And I will sing differently at dawn. I lead her to the willow-screened lane where the owl waits, reforming from drifting moon motes. She climbs upon its feathered mantle. I steady her but do not mount. The owl will carry you unseen. When it sets you down, the postern gate will already be closed behind you. She grasps my hand one heartbeat longer than necessary. My father believes danger wears peasant boots, she whispers. But salvation, it appears, owns no pedigree. Then she releases. The owl leaps. Wind and white silence rush upward. And soon both princess and sentinel are no more than a pale stitch against the indigo quilt of sky. Echoes and embers. I return to the garden bench, still warm from her presence. The moon-lace petals she brushed scatter across the stone, glowing faint as coals. Behind the city's rooftop seam, fireworks burst in crimson spirals, final throes of the mask. Their mirrored flashes flicker along North Glass spire, briefly painting the fat tear tracks of rain on its obsidian panes. In my palm, the prism steady beats, a subdued drummer counting down to the next verse. I whisper a promise to it, to her, to the owl dissolving in the heavens. This story has only opened its cage. The brightest flight is yet to come. And though dawn still lurks hours away, I feel the first pulse of morning stir beneath my ribs. An ember of courage, fanned by the wing beats of guardians and the laughter of a princess who, for one moonlit hour, was free. Chapter 7. Claudia's Jealous Plot. I must now turn the lantern of the tale upon Claudia Valcourt, First Lady-in-Waiting to Princess Elisande, and, until recently, the silent warden of Northglass Spire. From the hour the Queen died, Claudia's word in the women's wing carried a finality sharper than any steward's decree. She chose gowns, timed lessons, and smothered every childish adventure before it drew breath. To the court she projected flawless obedience, but obedience in Claudia masked an older hunger, to matter so absolutely that the princess could not smile without first consulting her shadow. The morning after Elisande's secret flight with Leo, Claudia sensed a fracture she could not name. It began with the princess rising late, 12 strokes past the palace bell, and greeting the storm-gray world with laughter. Elisande's feet were bare, her cheeks ruddy, her nightdress, hem smeared with streaks of riverbed soil no corridor in Northglass could supply. Yet when Claudia pressed for an explanation, the princess merely hummed a tune so unfamiliar that every mirror seemed to tilt closer, eager to catch its echo. At noon, the royal seamstress arrived for fittings. While unlacing the nightdress, she found, clinging to the inner flounce, the wilted petal of a moonlace flower, white as milk, fragrant as snow. No such flower survives inside palace walls. Claudia dismissed the seamstress and studied the evidence alone. Muddy hem, foreign bloom, the faintest whiff of night air still tangled in chestnut hair. Jealousy prickled like stinging nettle under velvet gloves. Someone had trespassed upon her dominion. She went first to the guards who patrolled the bridge and the spiral stair. They swore no lock had shifted, no hinge had squeaked, and their ledgers bore no gaps. Next, she interrogated the kitchen mater who delivered the princess's supper. Tray returned untouched, as though a different feast had already satisfied. Royal hunger. At last, when twilight fell and candles grayed the air of the women's wing, Claudia slipped into the princess's bedchamber and knelt beside the hearth. There, hidden between flagstones, she discovered 2 grains of river pebble, round, white, and smelling faintly of damp willow. They matched no stone in the palace garden. Claudia rose with her certainty sealed. Elisande had, by some sorcery, wandered beyond the black glass. Worse, she returned aglow, eyes bright, spirit quickened, as though the world outside walls offered gifts her lady-in-waiting could never bestow. Jealousy evolved then into colder purpose. If another influence courted the princess, Claudia would expose and eviscerate it, even if she must pour salt across every road in Silverford. That evening, she requested audience with King Roland. In the great oak-paneled study, She related her suspicions in a voice balanced between devotion and alarm. The king, hollow-eyed from sleepless nights, listened as though Claudia's words described a nightmare he thought already buried. "You are certain?" he rasped. "I have never known the princess to lie," Claudia answered. "Yet her clothing lies for her. Fresh mud, foreign blossoms, signs of trespass. If prophecy hunts her, your majesty, it has already scaled the walls." Roland's fist closed around a quill until it snapped. He looked toward the frost-black windows, where candle flames mirrored like prison bars. "Double the watch," he commanded. "No servant enters her chambers unless your own seal approves it. If the trespasser returns, I want his head before dawn." Claudia bowed, but her mind raced ahead. She needed proof that could not be dismissed. Wine-blurred guards might imagine footsteps. Gardeners might accidentally scatter petals. But stone could not invent itself. Stone could lead an army straight to the traitor's door. 2 nights later, she sewed a silken pouch no broader than a lady's palm and filled it with tiny alabaster pebbles, quarried from the same riverbank whose scent still clung to the princess's gown. She pierced the pouch's hem with a needle, leaving a slit fine as a hair. Then, before dusk extinguished the last rehearsal of swallows beneath the eaves, Claudia stitched the pouch into the inside fold of Elisanda's traveling cloak. The cloak the princess thought purely ceremonial, meant only for window promenades and corridor strolls. Every step the girl took would shake loose a single pale stone. Breadcrumbs for the vigilant. All day Claudia hovered as guardian angel, all venom hidden behind impeccable poise. She brushed Elisanda's curls, complimented her embroidery, and never blinked whenever the princess raised curious eyes. But that night, after candles dimmed, Claudia waited in the servants' antechamber, ear pressed to the timber door. Hours passed. Silence reigned. Claudia half believed her trap unnecessary, until, deep into the watch when most hearts surrendered to sleep, she heard the faint clack of the crystal door unlatching. She sprang, cracked the door a finger's width, and glimpsed her mistress gliding down the spiral stair, cloak hooded, a glow of soft light preceding her like a will-o'-the-wisp. Claudia counted to 10, gathered her own mantle, then followed. Never too close, never so far she lost the whisper of slippered feet on stone. The descent ended at a grate Claudia had not known existed. Through it, she watched Elisanda place a hand upon empty air, and saw the iron lattice tilt open as though unlocked by invisible keys. Beyond, darkness swallowed both princess and glow. Claudia cursed softly, pressed through in pursuit, and found herself in a tunnel older than the spire itself, smelling of dust and lost lullabies. The princess was nowhere, yet the floor glimmered, one pale pebble, then another, dotted along the passage like fallen stars. Claudia's pulse surged. She gathered the first stone, then the next, tucking them into her sleeve until her arms sagged with weight. At the far exit, she hesitated. The rumor-ridden night outside, foreign silhouettes of rooftops, the hush of trees. But ambition trampled hesitation. She stepped into open air. A spectral breeze chilled her cheeks. Ahead stretched a riverside, lane flanked by silent cottages. Pebbles shone in moonlight, unmistakable trail markers. She followed them across the footbridge, through dew-silver reeds, and into a courtyard haloed by pale flowers. There, infamous as a painting sprung to life, stood the gentleman of the blue constellations, cloak reversed, sapphire clasp catching starlight. By his side, eyes closed in contentment, swayed Princess Elisanda, barefoot on the flagstones. Claudia's fury sharp-spiked. She crouched behind a marble balustrade, greedily absorbing every detail. The thief's face, the clandestine garden, the unnatural white blossoms not even court botanists could coax. Here was proof beyond rumor. Proof to shatter the king's wavering trust, proof to recast Claudia as savior of the royal bloodline once and for all. But she was not alone in her spying. From the far corner of the courtyard, a shape detached, an enormous fox the color of live embers, eyes molten bronze. It regarded her with an intelligence that burned. Claudia gasped. The fox raised its snout and released a soundless bark. Instantly, every torch in the garden extinguished, plunging the night into viewless dark. When fire streaked back seconds later, fox and lovers were gone, the flagstones bare but for luminous petals and, yes, her own scattered stones, betraying her vantage. Panic clutched her throat. If she returned empty-handed, the king might doubt her. If she remained, Leo might emerge and silence her forever. Yet ambition is a torch difficult to douse. She knelt, gathered fresh petals in her kerchief, and fled to the palace by routes only servants know. Kitchens, laundry chutes, a forgotten vent that breathed spice and steam into unused storage rooms. King Roland received her at dawn, summoned from half-sleep by Claudia's breathless insistence. She knelt before him in the council alcove, a single candelabrum their only witness. These stones, she poured them across a map of the capital, fell from her highness's cloak. They led me outside the walls. She produced the moon lace, petals. These grow in no royal garden. And then she spoke Leo's name, Master Leo of Fernvale, cloaking the syllables in just enough contempt to brand them treason. The king's eyes darkened. He ordered a writ of seizure, Leo's house to be searched, his person detained, his assets frozen until interrogation decided his fate. Furthermore, the watch around Northglass Spire would triple. Any servant found slack would answer with stripes. And Claudia, radiant in her moment, received authority over the investigation. Every ledger, every secret door, every guard rotation now bent to her orchestration. Yet even triumph left her uneasy. The fox's silent warning gnawed at memory, those impossible flames extinguishing themselves at one bark. And deeper still, Claudia sensed that the princess's glow would not fade simply by clipping fresh wings. Something within Elisande had awakened, something Claudia could not unteach, so she devised a second stratagem. Visiting the city's embassies under guise of arranging festival shipments, she met with the scar-jawed envoy, the woman whose porcelain mask had once scanned the mask crowds. Over spiced coffee they shared grievances invisible to most women of their rank. The burden of ensuring order when kings grow erratic, the cost of protecting a realm from myths that leak beneath doorways. Claudia laid her cards. A charlatan had ensnared the princess. He held a relic rumored to unseat monarchs. She, Claudia, required discreet trackers and legal cover to seize both relic and rogue. The envoy listened, and when the coffee cooled, she placed upon the saucer a copper coin bearing crossed arrows, the token of Crown's peace jurisdiction. The Crown dislikes freelance miracles, she said. Secure your bird. We shall clip the pauper's tongue. Thus, jealous vigilance linked arms with state paranoia, forging a blade honed at two edges. By night's end, Claudia commanded a net of spies, from discreet maids to alley runners, to chart Leo's every footstep. If the princess escaped again, 100 eyes would follow. If moonlace petals crossed palace gates, they would not scatter unseen. Yet Claudia had forgotten one variable: the guardians. On the second night after her audience, she dreamt of the ember fox, its molten eyes melting her silken shoes, its breath curling around her throat in tongues of flame. She woke slick with sweat, only to find the silver arrow coin on her bedside table bent clean in half, as though bitten by colossal jaws. Her hands trembled, but her resolve hardened like quenched steel. Guardians or no guardians, she would safeguard the prophecy, bend it if necessary, so that it broke upon her command rather than the king's fear. And if the princess's happiness was collateral, so be it. Happiness was a luxury for those who had not yet tasted true power. Outside her casement, dawn flared across the river, turning Quill's waters to quicksilver. In that ruthless light, Claudia composed the warrants that would storm Leo's townhouse at sundown and drag the gentlemen of the blue constellations into chains of iron and accusation. But in the hush between heartbeat and signature, she failed to notice a single alabaster pebble roll from her sleeve onto the tiled floor. One tiny witness to the traps she herself carried, marking her path for any guardian clever enough to read. The wheel of intrigue thus completed its turn. Jealousy had planted its seeds, the kingdom held its breath, and somewhere in a river courtyard no soldier yet dared breach. Moonlace blossoms stirred in a breeze scented with both inevitability and rebellion. Chapter 8. Second Daring Rescue. Mid-September's moon rises bruised and swollen, the color of tarnished copper. At its first appearance, I feel disaster tightening like wire around my ribs. Claudia's snare is closing. By day, her spies pace. The key beneath my balcony, rifling fish crates and feigning wagers on swan races. By night, lean silhouettes crouch on neighboring roofs. Arrow sigil lanterns shuddered black between glances. Every rumor says the king has signed a writ for my arrest at sunset tomorrow. Tomlin brings the news while buttoning my travel coat. "They'll come with chains and ledgers," he whispers, face raw with worry. "I saw the warrant myself. Master Leo of Fernvale, to be seized for treasonous enchantments against Her Highness." I nod once, not trusting my voice. On the escritoire, the quartz prism ticks like a muted clock, the intervals between pulses shortening as if it, too, hears approaching boots. No option remains. Either rescue Elisanda tonight, or lose her to Claudia's gilded dungeon forever, and lose the prism to hands that would weld prophecy into manacles. Scouting the snare. At dusk, I slip through a rear gate into the alley. Network called the Weaver's Veins. Cloak turned to its starlit face so the shadows recognize me as kin. I tap the prism twice against an iron drainpipe. The Ember Fox Guardian coalesces beside me, bronze eyes glossy with mischief. "Find the Watchers," I murmur. "Show me their lines." The fox streaks north, weaving past cabbage stalls and butcher carts, each pawfall igniting a spark that dies before it can gossip. 3 streets later, it returns and nudges my calf toward a tumble-down tannery. Up in the loft, through a cracked shutter, 2 Crown's Peace bruisers catalog chalked maps of Northglass. Pebbles identical to Claudia's trick glint in a burlap. Pouch on the table. new ammunition. So, they will let Elisanda wander, follow the falling stones, then close the noose around us both. I draw a slow breath. Very well, I tell the fox. Then we rewrite the map. Moths in the library. Night. Deepens. I pay a final visit to my townhouse study, where Tomlin waits amid stacks of borrowed atlases and half-finished odes. Together we grind alabaster into powder, dye half of it indigo with crushed violet ink, then fashion 24 counterfeit breadcrumb sachets, one white like Claudia's, one star dark like midnight petals. Into each pouch I stitch a loop of silver thread, the spell-wrought thread Madame Astrid once sewed along the cloak's hem, thread that obeys unspoken command. Tomlin watches my flying fingers. What happens when they follow the stones? They'll arrive, I answer, precisely everywhere and nowhere at once. He swallows but does not argue. Loyalty requires stranger currencies with every sunrise. At the 11th bell I send him away to cousins in Greenpoint across the river, pressing a pouch of fox gold plates into his knuckles. Return only when swan lilies bloom, I say. He mutters something about stubborn employers, wipes his eyes, and slips into the dark. I am suddenly alone with the ticking prism and a silence so ripe it feels like thunder about to remember its Voice 3 infiltration revised. The usual postern tunnel is surely watched now, so I gamble higher. From river moorings I rent a tar-stained fishing skiff, pole it beneath the sheer obsidian wall of North Glass, and anchor where rainspouts gouge the stone. There, 30 yards above, juts a forgotten gargoyle the shape of a kneeling ram. Mouth, wide, cheek streaked by centuries of soot. One tap of the prism and the spectral owl guardian descends. White wings the hush at the heart of a blizzard. I loop rope beneath its talons, grip tight, and we climb soundlessly to the gargoyle's gullet. An ancient chute for kitchen smoke opens behind cracked fangs. I slide in, boots skidding against glazed ceramic, cloak-shielding sparks, until the flue widens into a maintenance niche, no guard patrols. From there I creep along rafters and service ladders until I overlook the princess's antechamber. 2 maid guards doze by the hearth, pikes crossed. Above them flickers a lantern whose glass is etched with Claudia's arrow crest. I draw 1 sachet of violet ink stones, clip the silver thread to the cloak's starry fringe, and whisper, "Scatter as night." The bag loosens. Pebbles flow like liquid shadow, roll gently across the flagstones and under doors, turning corners beyond sight. Each pebble hums a frequency only the fox understands, an itinerary of decoys. Reunion under crystal. I find Elisanda at her desk again. Pen halted midway through a stanza that rhymes freedom with moonspun hymn. When I appear, she rises without fear. Expectation has replaced astonishment in her eyes. There are watchers, she breathes. I know. Will you trust me once more? To the last page. Cautiously, I fit a plainer cloak around her shoulders. Gray wool, no jewels, and press. One white pebble pouch into the hidden seam. Walk as you did before. When stones start to fall, keep pace, she half smiles. Breadcrumbs for wolves. Wolves, foxes, owls, and a lynx if dawn allows. Footsteps echo in the corridor, Claudia's voice issuing crisp commands. Time buckles. I clasp the princess's hand and hurry her toward the rafters, then into the flue chute. We descend in slow slides, soot flecking our clothes. At the mouth, the owl awaits. Elisanda straddles its feathered back with surprising poise. I grip behind, whisper, to the river shadows, and we plunge. Wind tears smoke from our hair as the owl skims rooftops. Behind us, alarm bells erupt, clanging overlaps like jagged brass rain. In the waning moon, I glimpse torches veering along, the palace quay converging on the postern tunnel, Claudia chasing her white stones. 5 foxfire diversion. We land behind the willow brake at my garden, but I do not linger. The fox materializes, nose twitching. I toss it a satchel of violet stones. Plant these down every alley from Piper's Lane to Widow's Cross, and light. The lamps. Bronze eyes gleam. It vanishes. Moments later, a chain of doorways across 6 districts ignite with sudden flares. Lanterns relit in patterns that mimic clandestine signals. Crown's peace agents swarm, mistaking each burst for our fresh location. Confusion spreads like spilled oil. Orders twist. Squads double back. Meanwhile, I lead Elisanda through aqueduct culverts beneath the silk guild hall, re-emerge near the eye. Mill wheel where torrents drown conversation, then slip into the weaver quarters. There, 3 night joiners wait exactly as hired. Cloaks reversed, locksaws ready. With silent nods, they prise open a drain gate to the old mint catacombs, a maze only counterfeiters remember. Elisanda's eyes widen at the subterranean expanse, arches dripping blue stalactites. Is this still your city? No, I admit, guiding her through pillars etched with obsolete coin faces. It belongs to those who know its second skin. The links at the square. When we climb a rust rung, ladder to street level again, the sky sweats pale pre-dawn. Somewhere bells hammer a warning code. Target near Mint Square. Converge. Claudia's hounds have sniffed our trail. Mint Square yawns ahead. Broad flagstones, execution scaffold half rebuilt for next week's festival. Soldiers pour in from 3 streets, spears leveled. Over their helms Claudia strides, cloak whip cracking, face aflame. Seize them, I whisper to the prism thrice. A tremor ripples underfoot as obsidian air stitches itself into a colossal lynx, fur streaked with constellations, eyes black lake deep. Gasps ricochet among troops. A few stumble backward. Claudia alone stands her ground, palms trembling yet resolute. The lynx lowers its head until those fathomless eyes dwarf her. Claudia tries to speak, a decree, a curse, but sound flees her. Throat. With one velvet paw, the guardian slides her gently aside, as if moving an errant chess piece that no longer matters. I urge Elisande onto the lynx's back. Its spine is broad as a banquet table. I mount behind, wrap an arm about her waist. With a bound that pulverizes flagstone, the beast springs south, over statues and awnings, into dawn's dilute glow. Arrows chase but tumble harmless against starlit hide. From high vantage I watch Claudia shrink, fists beating silent fury into the air. She grabs a fallen soldier's bow, knocks an arrow, and hesitates. Perhaps prophecy tugs her wrist, perhaps doubt. The arrow drops uselessly. Across the quill, the lynx lands on the eastern river wall and melts into mist. We dash onto the Reed Reeve Bridge just as portcullis chains rattle, guards raising barriers to trap us. But river bargemen, bribed earlier with fox gold, pivot their log rafts sideways to shield us. I cut a mooring rope. The raft lurches, knocking the portcullis lever askew. Iron teeth halt mid-drop. We slip through the gap, sprint to the far bank, then vanish amid dawn fog orchards. There, at a half-ruined hermitage among pear trees, I finally let us breathe. Elisande sinks onto stone steps, laughter and tears sharing her breath. I kneel, offering water from a goat skin. What now? She asks, voice hoarse. Now, I answer, touching the prism's calm glow. We stop fleeing and start choosing. Silverford is no longer safe. Beyond the marshes lies the sapphire coast. Ships sail every tide, east to republics where kings hold less sway, west to islands where prophecy is only the pastime of bored fishermen. She fingers the moonlace bloom still pinned behind her ear. Will I be princess there? You'll be Elisande there, singer of unbarred songs. The rest is detail. She meets my eyes, resolve rising like a second sun. Then take me to the coast. In the orchard's hush, pears thud softly onto grass. Summer's contracts falling overdue. Gray light washes the ruined cloisters, and with it a sensation of pages turning, of a story deciding to outrun its own margins. We set off along the water meadow path, guardians pacing in unseen orbit, Claudia's net left tangled among torch shadows behind us. Each step echoes more quietly than the last, until at last the only sound is the steady duet of breathing. Hers, mine, and the prism's slow, satisfied hum, as though, for the moment, it approves the direction of the tale. Chapter 9. The Guardian's Reckoning. Storm sign over the salt fens. 3 dawns after we fled the pear orchard, Elisanda and I reached the salt fens, an inland sea of reeds so broad it swallows the horizon. All night broom had boiled out, of brackish pools. Now the sun climbed a finger's breadth and vanished again behind pewter vapor. Our goal, the Sapphire Coast, lay 2 days farther west, but every rumor said Claudia's troopers had occupied the only causeway that cut the fens like a stitch of stone. I felt their presence before I saw them, the hush of marching boots absorbed by fog, the acrid tang of pitch torches hidden somewhere ahead. Beside me the prism throbbed a faster pulse, as if counting down to some verdict older than law. Claudia draws the noose. We advanced until silhouettes cohered, rows of shieldmen emblazoned with crossed arrows, pikes sheathed in tar to muffle. Clank. At their center rode Claudia Valcourt, cloak cinched high, river pebble sash hanging like trophies at her hip. Astride the same gray destrier she used for palace parades, she raised a gauntleted hand, and the line of soldiers snapped to stillness. "By writ of King Roland," she cried, voice cold as cut glass, "the traitor Leo of Fernvale and the royal hostage Elisanda Meyer Roland are commanded to yield." Hostage, one word that soured the air around us. Elisanda's fingers laced mine, knuckles white. I could almost hear Claudia's smile sharpening behind the fog. Call of the 3. Slipped the sapphire cloak from my shoulders and whispered to its star-stitched hem, "All deaths are due." Then I struck the quartz prism against my palm. Once, twice, thrice. At the first strike, the spectral owl appeared above, wings unfurling in a gust that shredded the mist and laid bare a circle of blue sky. At the second, the ember-furred fox strolled from shadow, bronze eyes alive with trickster fire. At the third, the midnight pelt lynx rose from the marsh itself, vast, silent, its paws dripping constellations into black water. Soldiers staggered, shields dipped. Some whispered prayers, but Claudia only nudged her horse forward. Pretty illusions, she scoffed, though the tremor in her reins betrayed her. Astrid's last demand. Fog behind Claudia rippled and parted to reveal Madame Astrid, ledger cradled like an iron-bound infant, sapphire cloak of her own flaring, in ghost wind. Her face was pale but resolved. "Leo," she called, "return the prism and the guardians will stand down. Deny me and you condemn a kingdom's mind to madness." Her plea struck me harder than any spear. Beneath the steel there pulsed genuine fear. Fear for a king sliding deeper into night. Yet I sensed another truth thrumming beneath her words, a truth only the prism could sing aloud. Song of Reckoning. I lifted the crystal high. "If this stone truly heals," I told her, "let it speak for itself." With a breath I'd never learned but seemed to remember, I hummed the note the prism had been saving. The quartz flashed, not white or gold, but every color between, heartbeat and dawn. Sound rolled over the marsh, a bell choir in one perfect chord that struck armor, bone, and sky alike. Soldiers fell to their knees, weapons forgotten. Claudia clutched her temples, her river pebbles burst into harmless chalk. Astrid's ledger snapped open, pages fluttering madly until they tore free and spiraled upward like doves set ablaze with sunlight. Far away, so far the capital should have muffled it, the great bells of Silverford began to ring back, answering. The chord as if woken from a fevered sleep. King over distance. In that reverberation, the prism cast a vision visible to every soul on the causeway. King Roland, alone in his audience hall, head bowed beneath invisible chains. The cord washed through him, light threaded the cracks of his grief, and like frost surrendering to thaw, his eyes lifted, clear, unshadowed. "Enough," his voice echoed across leagues of fen and palace stone. "Let my daughter choose." With that, the writs of seizure burned away from Claudia's satchel, curling into blue flame that left no ash. Judgment of the Guardians. The owl swooped low, its marble gaze fixing on Madame Astrid. Softly it set one talon on her ledger's empty spine, a gesture neither cruel nor kind, merely final. She released the clasp. The metal sank into fen water and was gone. Tears lit her lashes. The fox approached then, touched its fiery muzzle to her wrist, and the silver in her hair warmed to soft autumn gold. Debt forgiven, but memory retained. Next the lynx padded to Claudia. It did not roar or strike. It stared. In that dark mirror gaze she beheld, I think, every choice that welded jealousy to cruelty. Her shoulders sagged. She dismounted, knelt. Not to me, not to the princess, but to a truth she could no longer outrun. Paths part. Fog returned in tatters, gentle now. Soldiers sheathed weapons, helping one another rise. Astrid crossed the causeway toward us. The king's mind is mended, she breathed. The prism's promise is kept. And its future? I asked. Yours and hers, Astrid said, nodding to Elisanda. Guardians bond to intent, not title. She stepped back, palms empty. I held the crystal out to the princess. Light glimmered like dawn on seawater. Where it goes, she whispered, I will tend its song. She slipped it into the inner fold of her cloak, over her heart. Claudia rose, eyes rimmed red but steady. If freedom is your choice, she told Elisanda, I will not bar the gate again. A promise or a penance, perhaps both. Toward open water. By noon the causeway stood deserted save wind and gull cries. We walked west, guardians padding invisibly at our backs until reed beds gave way to sand dunes and, at last, the breath of open sea. On a rise above indigo waves we paused. Behind us the bells of Silverford tolled once more, not warning now, but benediction. I turned to the princess. Ship or shore? I asked. Both. She smiled. The smile of someone who finally owns the coin of her own tomorrow. Let us sail until we find a coast that feels like beginning, then build a garden no wall could hold. Far out, a white-sailed brigantine rocked at anchor, its pennant bearing a constellation I recognized, a fox, an owl, a lynx, 3 stars entwined. I felt the cloak's fabric hum approval. Hand in hand, we started down the dune path. Behind us, wind erased our footprints in a breath, as though the marsh, the causeway, and every reckoning had already turned to story. One soon to be told beneath strange skies, with chapter titles still unwritten. And overhead, higher than gulls, higher than clouds, the guardians wheeled, 3 sparks against the wide blue, keeping watch until the world decided what it wished to become next. Chapter 10. A New Reign of White Roses. Seaward Beginnings. A fortnight after the Guardian's reckoning, we boarded the brigantine Starcurrent. her sails stitched with silver threads that shimmered like dawn on quiet surf. The sapphire coast greeted us with cliffs veined blue-green and villages that traded lullabies for salt cod. Leo, cloak trimmed to a travel cape, hair sunbitten, took rooms above a cooper's shop. Princess Elisanda, cloaked only in her own name, spent mornings barefoot among tide pools, teaching local children to skip stones that carried echoes of new songs. At dusk they planned quiet fireside councils with maps, letters, and one prism that pulsed approvingly in the lamplight. Then, on the 10th sunset, a king's messenger arrived astride a foam-lathered destrier, bearing scrolls sealed in white wax. Royal edict. The throne no longer binds my daughter, nor she the throne. Yet a kingdom is not a cage, but a garden in need of honest gardeners. Return, both of you, that we may sow it anew. The parchment also bore signatures of the council, of Madame Astrid, now Royal Harmonicus, and, surprisingly, of Claudia Valcourt, countersigned Regent Custodian until rightful steward returns. Elisande folded the letter, sea wind tangling her hair. A garden, she breathed, not a cage. Together they charted a star route home, guardians wheeling overhead like distant promise. The journey back through open gates. Their ship cut north through autumn fog. At each port, rumors preceded them. The princess who walked invisible walls now walks the world. The pauper who sang to guardians will sing to roses. Caravans offered escort. Fishermen gifted nets woven with luck knots. Children pressed shells into Leo's hands for your new palace pond. When Northglass Spire finally leapt above river mist, its obsidian panes were no longer blank. White silk streamers fluttered from every casement, and the bridging causeway, once bristling spears, stood open, strewn with alabaster petals that whispered beneath boot soles like soft applause. Coronation in the Garden of First Snow, King. Roland, mind cleared by the prism's cord, yet shoulders bowed by years of self-forged chains, met them beneath an archway of blooming ice roses. A hybrid Elisanda had coaxed in coastal soil and brought home in clay pots. Their scent, cool, honey with a hint of lightning, drifted through courtyards where crowds held breaths as fragile as spun sugar. There was no throne room ceremony. Instead, amid moonlace and new-rooted roses, Roland laid bronze circlet and scepter on a marble plinth. A crown, he declared, voice steady, is a burden of listening. My ears grow old, but yours, he turned to Elisanda, are tuned to tomorrow. He lifted the circlet toward her, and she, in turn, set it on Leo's brow beside her own trembling fingers. Two halves of a moon rejoined. Bells pealed, not the iron fear bells of past decree, but the glass-throated harmonics Astrid had restored. Their resonance coaxed unopened rosebuds into sudden bloom until every trellis blazed white. Reforms beneath spiral petals. The first decree abolished window bars on North Glass Spire. The tower became a public conservatory where any child could climb spiral stairs and press palms to the same glass that once mirrored loneliness. The second decree rewrote land tithes, converting idle hunting estates into communal orchards. Leo's experience with Fernvale woodlots guided new forestry charters. Take only what your satchel can bear comfortably, he reminded ministers, words the council inscribed in marble at the city gates. Claudia accepted the post of Mistress of Transitions, tasked with easing servants from fear to curiosity. Some never forgave her former zeal, yet it was she who commissioned free schools where palace maids could learn letters beside merchants' sons. Each classroom bore a carving of a fox, an owl, and a lynx, to teach that even guardians born of legend can change the world through watchfulness, cleverness, and silent strength. Astrid, ledger now filled with unbroken pages, established the Harmonic College within the old Mint catacombs, where mathematicians, healers, and luthiers studied how light and sound braid into health. The prism's song served as tuning fork, its glow guided surgeons' scalpels and masons' chisels alike. White Rose winters and summer fairs. Years. Wheeled. Snow fell and melted upon hedges heavy with winter roses. Blooms bred to open only when frost touched them, so that the garden glowed even in deepest night. Silverford adopted the flower as civic emblem. Artisans pinned silken replicas to hats. Bakers dusted marzipan petals atop festival cakes. Each spring the king, now elder gardener, no longer sovereign, lit the first lantern at the glass mask, renamed the Lantern Fair of Free Paths. One lantern was always set afloat on the quill, for those who still felt caged somewhere beyond the city's reach. And each year more lanterns took wing, until river and sky seemed molten with possibility. The quiet legacy of guardians. The trio of spectral protectors appeared rarely after coronation. Once, a miller claimed the owl hovered above his barn, the night his wife birthed twins. He woke to find feed sacks neatly stacked and a single marble feather on the cradle. Another time, travelers lost on moorland followed foxfire tracks to safety, swearing they saw bronze eyes winking through heath, and on the winter solstice, the lynx's paw prints, traced in starlight frost, circled a village whose harvest had failed until relief wagons arrived. Yet most days the guardians lived only in murals and lullabies, proof that power, once spent rightly, need not loom. Epilogue by Moon-Laced Gate. I fast forward now to a late summer evening when cicadas drone like distant timbre, and the palace gate, fashioned into an iron rose vine, swings open for no procession at all, only two figures stealing. Minutes before children's bedtime. Leo, crown exchanged for gardener's gloves, kneels to guide a toddler's hands around pruning shears. Nearby, a boy of 5 steadies a lantern while his mother, Queen Elisanda the listener, teaches him the melody of the prism, simple as a whistle, holy as sunrise. Its 3-note refrain rises, weaving through hedges and into night air where it mingles with owl-down hush, fox-bark laughter, lynx quiet vigilance, petals, shaken loose by twilight breeze, drift across the grass. Some land in a crib of recent cedar, Roland's final gift to his littlest granddaughter before he slipped peacefully into legend the previous winter. White roses blooming unbidden on his grave. Under a sky quickening with constellations, Elisanda lifts her gaze. She might almost see 3 bright flecks wheel once, blessing the garden that is no longer a prison, but a promise kept. She smiles at Leo, at lantern-bold children, at tomorrow itself, and whispers the closing line. May every wall remember, it was once a seed, and every seed recall it was born for birds and wind. Fade on the hush of petals meeting earth, fade on soft chords of prism light, fade on white roses glowing where once only cold crystal stood. Great work today! Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.